when y'all find yourself going in the wrong direction because you're following somebody who is dumber than you are, and then you ask what happened. What has happened is that we're the only people who select the dumbest people among us to lead us. Nobody else does that.
You know, I hate living in Detroit. I've lived here most of my life, just like you. They say that in America black people live all over the country, but we all know that isn't true. All of us live in one town, Detroit. I live in Detroit, and so do you. If you live in Memphis, you live in Detroit. If you live in D.C., you live in Detroit. If you live in Newark, South Philly, Birmingham, New Orleans, Chicago, Oakland, you live in Detroit. I know. You look at Detroit's problems and say, sure glad my city's not as screwed up as they are. But is your city really that much better off than Detroit? Detroit's problems are merely a sharper reflection of the plagues that are sapping the life out of the town you live in as well. So, how did we come to be ruled over by fools? The civil rights movement was used as a springboard for the select few in the movement who realized they could use their fellow baby boomers as a permanent power base. Blacks decided to simply trust that a black person in power wouldn't betray them, and in doing so, they forgot the most important and basic lesson of politics. Power doesn't respect weakness. Power only respects power. If your constituency has no money, but they're making demands, the people in power are going to look to see if they have any means of punishing them should they defy you. And if they see that you are not organized or not willing to turn off the TV and vote them out of office, they will laugh and go back to screwing things up. Because we asked for a lot, but not once did we ever require anything of them. Not once have we asked serious questions of these guys, like, are you a drug user? Because you can't really say you're going to combat drugs if you smoke crack. Are you faithful to your wife? Because I can't really expect you to honestly spend my tax dollars if you can't even be honest with the woman you swore to stand by till death do you part. Can you explain to me what businesses we need to cultivate in my area? Because I can't expect you to improve my neighborhood's financial condition when you don't even know or care what we need. See, it all comes back to the grassroots. If you can't manage your life at home, how are you ever going to be an effective employee? If you can't be a productive employee, how can you ever run a business? If you can't run a business, then how can you run a city? But how many of us own the house we live in, or even run a business for that matter? And if we don't do these things ourselves, I guess it's difficult to take a hard line on the subject. But we should. Because these things are all interrelated. Before our wonderful mayor seized power in his bloodless coup a few years ago, I asked some of the people who were planning to vote for him, why? What is it he's going to do? Better yet, what is it you want him to do? Not surprisingly, not a single one could answer that basic, simple question. When you don't know what the politician you intend to vote for is going to do, that makes you ignorant and careless. But you don't know what it is you even want from a politician. That makes you an idiot and a danger to the black body politic. Because if you're not voting based on the facts of the condition you live in, then that means you're not dealing in reality. And when people living in a fantasy world are allowed to take part in the real world of participatory elections, everyone suffers. The civil rights movement got us using the wrong vocabulary. We said we wanted jobs, and that's exactly what we got, jobs. Garbage man, social worker, janitor. If the civil rights movement had truly been about black empowerment, and not just integration with whites, then they would have had people using a real vocabulary of black power. Don't demand jobs, demand businesses, something that we own. And we're so easily bought off. If some politician replaced our streetlight 10 years ago, or repaved a couple of sidewalk panels 20 years ago, they will have a loyal voter for life. Let me tell you something. Don't you ever thank a politician for doing his job. That's what you pay him for. You go to Dallas and see how long the mayor stays in office if he doesn't produce for his constituency every month. And you better believe they expect a hell of a lot more than a street light to be replaced or a new concrete sidewalk. They don't give a damn what you did 10 years ago or even 10 weeks ago. Today is what counts. But then again, our white, Asian, Hispanic neighbors know what they want and aren't at all bashful about tossing a politician out on his ear if he fails to deliver, regardless of if that failure was his fault or not. Sooner or later, these self-interested con men are reduced to begging for mercy.
I humbly ask members of council, I humbly ask the business community, I humbly ask the religious community, I humbly ask the brothers and sisters of the city of Detroit, I humbly ask.
Don't tell me 40,000 people are coming here. They're not here. Now get off your asses and let's do something, and let's fix the biggest goddamn crisis in the history of this country. I'm at the point now where it don't matter. People are dying. They don't have homes. They don't have jobs. The city of New Orleans will never be the same.
We're both pretty speechless here.
Yeah, I don't know what to say.
I gotta go.
Okay.
Incompetence is expensive, and the people of New Orleans wound up having to pay the price. That's the purest sign of how weak and pathetic these so-called leaders are. A leader is supposed to be the last one to give up, the last one to say, please show mercy. A leader is supposed to be the picture of strength. So, why do we keep voting for these fools? Well, I can tell you, but you won't like the answer, because it will hit too close to home. Black people have learned to hate and fear intelligence. I guess we've been so used to losing, we don't know what it means to want to win. We have been degraded to the point where we don't seek knowledge. Dr. John Henrik Clarke should have been an international bestseller, living lavishly off of huge royalties from the sales of his books. Instead, he died poor in his modest Harlem home, and they had to take up a collection just to bury him. Dr. Ben is still with us, but he's living in a convalescent home, his students having to ask that he be sent donations, because although he gave us back our knowledge of what we had done, apparently we didn't think enough of it to embrace it. True knowledge makes our brains hurt, so we buy King Magazine and XXL. We don't have a clue what's going on in Darfur, or even Detroit for that matter, but we can recite chapter and verse what was happening on Steve Harvey's show this morning, or Will Smith's latest movie. And if someone was dumb enough to turn off our TV or tell us we couldn't go see Tyler Perry's latest cross-dressing escapade, we would be ready to kill. We consume everything, but produce nothing. And whenever some of us do make something for our people, we refuse to support it, unless it's something stupid. And we wonder why we aren't free. As an example, on my page from time to time, I see people who leave replies saying, "You sound white." Talk about an insult! But putting aside my umbrage at being compared to the very cave beasts I've dedicated my life to fighting against, there is another dynamic at play. People who fear knowledge. Black people were the originators of speech, writing, and language. We created those things. In my videos, I showed you how the Euro clowns didn't even get writing until 1800 years ago, when we as Africans had already had writing for over 4,000 years before that. Words are the currency of thought. My strict adherence to grammar and enunciation is a reflection of how I think. When some ghetto hustler turned politician comes along and uses small words, pronounces his sentences like he dropped out of 8th grade, we are pleased with that. Because in our minds, blacks aren't supposed to be on par with whites in any way. We say that's what we want, but we really don't. We want a slightly educated slave to be our representative, not the valedictorian. The jive-talking charlatans we keep voting into power are non-threatening to us. At least we don't feel threatened by them. If you don't know leadership when you see it, or refuse to accept it when it comes along, then it doesn't matter if someone has the courage of Frederick Douglass, the boldness of Marcus Garvey, the morality of Dr. King, or the courage and power of Malcolm. You will still turn your back on him and choose the class clown to lead you. Corrupt politicians thrive on an ignorant electorate, more so if that electorate is willfully ignorant. When the leadership fails, you are supposed to punish them severely. This is what all successful groups do. A leader who cannot produce either gets demoted or just gets out, but he cannot remain in charge, because no group who's serious about their interests is going to wait. Oh, and just so you know, when Kwame Kilpatrick and that whore he was cheating on his wife with got out of the hoosgow, they were both greeted to a hero's welcome. These two adulterous, scheming bastards cost the city $8 million plus in legal fees, and worse, shamed Detroit and Black America as a shining example of Negro misrule on a particularly massive scale. There's no way you can put a dollar figure on that. But hey, remember when old Marion Barry got out of jail after that little crack-smoking incident? He ran to get his old job back. And he got it. The people who defend their support of Kilpatrick sound exactly like the people who defended voting for Bass Pipe Barry after his conviction. Instead of looking for people who we think embody the struggle in some form or another, we need to start looking for good, solid leaders. But I guess when the bar is low enough, you can never be too wrong. There's a postscript to this story, and it's a cautionary tale that all blacks should heed. Our white enemies aren't going to give up on taking the major cities back from us. Some of you think when they retreated to the suburbs, they were running away. Not at all. It was merely a strategic fallback, a safe place where they could plan their reconquest of the inner city. Now, some of you think because Detroit has an 85% black population and Newark a 55% black population and New Orleans a 68% black population, that the whites will simply fume and rage but ultimately accept that blacks have them woefully outnumbered, and that is that. And if the city is crap, well, that means the whites won't want it anymore anyway. But have they left your city alone? Or are they still trying to use gentrification to expel the blacks from the city, the same way they did in Miami? Right now, the good white folks in Wayne County are letting the blacks stew in their own juices. But you've probably noticed that Detroit's black population is leaving the city in droves, and the whites have used police intimidation, illegal housing discrimination, and racial profiling in order to keep blacks out of the surrounding suburbs, which are 100% white. This is done so as to create a pattern where if you're black and you leave the city of Detroit, you also have to leave Wayne County. And for most of Detroit's black residents, that means leaving the state of Michigan altogether. The whites have Detroit surrounded, not like a group of neighbors, but like an army waiting for the order to invade. We've seen this happen in San Francisco, where all those good white liberals had no problem whatsoever allowing real estate investors to demolish black neighborhoods and then create housing so expensive that blacks couldn't afford the prices. This is ethnic cleansing, American style, but it's only a taste of what Detroit is in for if they don't make some rapid changes. And for those of you who think, well, San Francisco doesn't have that many black people to begin with. Detroit has 800,000 black people in it. Even the whites aren't crazy enough to try to forcibly remove that many people. You mean the same whites who kidnapped over 120 million Africans and shanghaied them to the other side of the world? The same whites who terrorized blacks after Reconstruction and forced the persecuted blacks to flee north, resulting in the largest migration in the country's history? The same whites who murdered over 3,000 blacks in Oklahoma when they destroyed the Black Wall Street and forced the blacks out of the city? The same whites who left 100,000 residents of New Orleans to drown or burn in the sun without food or water while the world watched? The same white people who then told those black New Orleanians to get on charter buses bound for Houston, where they promptly dumped them and then walked away. You mean those white people? As the white real estate offensive forces blacks out of Detroit, the demographics will begin to shift, as will the voting power. When they feel they've got enough of the city's council members in their pocket again, the whites will stop making polite offers to buy this or that property and instead will be demanding the city council use the power of eminent domain to give them the neighborhoods that refuse to sell. Make no mistake, the whites are planning to retake Detroit the same way they've begun the reconquest of New Orleans, Newark, Baltimore, Gary, Indiana, and anywhere else where blacks have set up shop. And when they do retake it, they intend to leave the blacks broke, homeless, and destitute. Kind of like they did in another major black city. And what are the black leaders of Detroit doing while all this is going on? Are they improving the conditions of Detroit's residents so they can stand on their own 2 feet and resist the economic war that's coming? Or are they preoccupied with something else?
I have the floor, President Pro Tem. I don't want to hear you anymore.
And you don't have to hear me. We don't have to hear you.
Then be quiet
So
because I'm speaking and I'm asking a
You do
question.
that at home, not here.
He didn't just get up in here by just coming. Y'all sent him up in here.
I'm not your father, but I am the president, and right now I have the floor.
Because I'm tired of that. Be respectful. You may not do that at home, but you're going to do it up in
Stop
here.
interrupting.
You grow up.
Don't let nobody talk about y'all, boy. Too many people died for us.
Control your house, and you know how to treat other women better.
You're the last one to talk.
I'm the first one to
Council
talk,
member.
dude. Shrek.
You're out of
Shrek.
order.
The first one to talk. Don't
You're out of
disrespect
order.
me.
We're here to fight. That's what I'm talking about.
I will call this to adjourn if you don't.
Do it, baby. Adjourn. Do it. Move to adjourn. Do
We're
it.
going to take a brief recess.
Do it.
It's
Because
done.
y'all not going to disrespect me up here.
You're the one that just interrupted me.
I can assure you that every Negro that is in political office in New York could not pass an 8th grade reading test.
Folks, we are all Detroiters now. That means we are all in trouble. And unless we get serious about what we want, unless you lay out an agenda in no uncertain terms at the grassroots, one that white people didn't create or control, then we are all going to go the way of the Motor City.